You can say what you want, but I never been scared. Never been scared. Never been. And I just won't stop. And I won't stop. And I
Welcome to the More Than Sports Podcast, where everyone has a story. On today's episode, we speak with Lydell Smith. Lydell is a three-time state champion with Evangel Christian Academy in Shreveport, Louisiana, where he played the position of middle linebacker on the football team. During Lydell's senior season, he was awarded with all-district and all-city honors. Lydell was also a member of the 2007 National Championship LSU Tigers. On today's episode, Lydell speaks to his thoughts on professional athletes and their responsibility with the most current social justice issues that transpired over the summer. He also takes time to discuss his time with the National Championship Tigers and how he found purpose after being dismissed from the team after his first season. Thank you for listening. Now let's start the conversation. All right, so my first question today will be, just can you tell me now where are you and your relationship with sports?
Yeah, that's a great question to start this thing off. So currently living here in Austin, Texas, and my relationship with sports at this point in my life is solely as a spectator, a fan, and someone who in some ways is still like connected to the game just through friends that are still active, whether they're playing in professional sports leagues or younger guys that I've had relationships with in the past, man, that are still playing or involved in some way. But last year was an interesting place for me in terms of my love for sports, just through everything that we experienced in 2020, man, from the pandemic. But really a lot more closely related to the things that were going on with social justice. And obviously now, man, you see we got the trial, for George Floyd that's going on. You know, the Breonna Taylor situation that took place, man. A lot of those things took a toll on me, like personally, and even in a lot of ways, man, spiritually. And it kind of made me just apathetic towards sports, man. Last year was probably the least amount of sports that I have watched in my life. Probably caught a couple of NFL games, and watched the NBA playoffs, man, just because I'm a huge LeBron fan. So LeBron kind of pulled me out of my apathy at the end of the year. But it was an interesting journey, man, because sports has been such a huge part of my life from early on, like waking up early in the morning before school, watching ESPN, getting dressed, seeing Stuart Scott, do the highlights, man, and you fall in love with sports from that place. Growing up in, Shreveport, Louisiana, going to the school that I went to, Evangel Christian Academy, like a known football power, but just overall, like athletics was such an important piece of my upbringing and my childhood. And I love the game still. I watch it, specifically football. As I've gotten older, I look at the game now, man. I'm like, ooh, that's dangerous. Like I would never want to put on a helmet again and shoulder pads. But being able to watch the game from a different perspective, notice certain things, pausing it, rewinding it back, looking at certain things, man, that like nobody would ever notice. A lot of the stuff dealing with like just linebacker footwork or something like that is very nerd-like. But I like digging into all that stuff. Always keeping up with some of the guys that I like to enjoy on ESPN, whether it's, Bomani Jones or Marcus Spears, LSU guys. So I always got love for my Tigers, Ryan Clark, guys like that. But always a love for sports, man. And even currently, it has shaped me in such a way with the way I see the world, with the way I handle people. It's provided for me, being in the locker room provides you a perspective from so many places and people, all over, that came from all over the country, man, that you get to have conversations with these people, and it allows you to see a different perspective that maybe you didn't see before. So at my core, man, I am a sports fanatic, I guess you could say, man. It's like a safe way to put it, is that I love the game, and that's been like such a huge part of my life.
Okay. And you mentioned a little bit earlier about some of the social injustice and things of that nature that happened over the summer. Just on your viewpoint, do you think athletes in general did enough, did too much, did just the right amount? Like, how do you see that? Because I know there's been a lot of judgment, specifically as it relates to LeBron that you mentioned earlier, on his involvement on a lot of the social injustice issues. And, I know Minnesota Timberwolves and things of that nature, they were significantly involved. And even just recently, there was a recent death in Minnesota, which all the teams ended up boycotting or at least postponing those games. So just currently now and even over the summer, as you alluded to, like, how do you view athletes' positions as it comes to social issues?
Yeah, it's tough because they're in an unenviable position. But with that position, they've been given a platform. And for better or worse, our country spotlights athletes and entertainers. And it's easier from my position or positions from places of maybe of a lesser platform to be highly critical. And so I'm aware of that as well and understanding the things and the pressures that they might be under. I was a little bit disappointed in that I felt like there was a window last year for opportunity that I knew was going to be a closing one. I knew that we were at a place last year where I felt like immediately after George Floyd's death, George Floyd being murdered on camera, that there was a time of unity that I wish that we would have tried to get as much done as possible. Even for the college athletes, they were really starting a lot of movements. They were saying that, hey, we're not going to play the season until certain things are done, and the pressures of capitalism and these entities eventually ended up like normal. What is normal is squashing and squelching a lot of these movements. And with the NBA guys, I feel like they had an opportunity. For me, like I said, it's easier to say from the outside that they had an opportunity to say, hey, man, we ain't playing. Like, we're not playing the rest of the season. And they didn't choose that. They chose to go on the bubble and use the platform in that way. And I feel like a lot of those things are related to the financials, which I understand as well. And I just, my hope last year was that more was done. And I still feel like there's opportunities to do more. It seems like these things are extremely cyclical because the system is so bad. It is what it is, and obviously at the end of the day, the responsibility shouldn't have to be upon athletes and entertainers, but in a lot of ways in this country it is. And so we hope for better days, and we hope that people are able to continue to use their platforms in ways that can provide opportunities and access. Man, it's about access to these things that we've been denied in this country.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with awareness, and I think just because athletes are so visible and people pay attention when athletes and entertainers speak, the athletes this past year and even currently, them having a voice and being intentional on how they're speaking out as it relates to voting rights issues, social injustice, police brutality, things of that nature. They're very important topics that need to be brought up and need to be brought up consistently. And it's very important that people like a LeBron and things of that nature that have a voice, that have millions of people that'll listen to them, millions of people that'll follow them, even if they don't necessarily agree with some of these athletes and some of these entertainers, they will at least listen to them because of their notoriety and because of their position. So I think just creating awareness, I think people who do vote have the opportunity to change their demographic, have to change their neighborhoods and their cities and their states. But they just have to be dialed in. They have to become informed for the most part. And I think a lot of times people look to other people to tell them how to think, how to vote. And that hadn't worked necessarily great for the African American community. in the past. So everybody being educated so you can speak on topics that are important to you and important to your neighborhood, I think is very critical. And I think with a lot of these athletes and entertainers coming out, rallying people to get registered to vote, rallying people to, petition in the streets. Obviously, we're looking for nonviolent petitions and things of that nature have been extremely important. It's extremely vital. But we can't, you can't stop now. You have to continue to press that foot forward. But that's kind of the thing that happens a lot of the times. Everybody gets some excitement and, everybody get that warm and fuzzy feeling. And everybody, marching and sending out petitions and things of that nature for, 3 to 6 months. And then you look up 2 years from now and we're still back in the same situation that we were before. So I know that that's very important and critical that everybody continues to press forward as it relates to voting, as it relates to police brutality, racial injustice, because, these systems have been put in place for centuries. So they're not going to come down overnight. So we have to be that much more diligent to continue to work and continue to come together as a community, multiple communities, multiple ethnicities, to make sure that everybody understands that their vote counts and how to apply that pressure and apply that influence to get what's in their best interest. Because whatever's in my best interest may not be in your best interest, and so on. So if you don't necessarily understand how that works and how those systems are set up, you're really leaving it up to other people to make decisions that impact your life. And it's just something that we need to continue to move forward with. But to kind of pivot back to you and your story. So could you tell us, how did you get started playing sports?
Yeah, so got started pretty much from my dad. I think the first sport that I played was t-ball, and my dad got me signed up, and that was the kind of the beginning of things, was t-ball, and then it was flag football after that, and those were kind of the main things for a while, was t-ball and flag football, and then that just continued to transition each piece along the way with both of those sports. I was not very good at basketball. I wish that I could have been 3 sports. Eventually, I ended up playing basketball as well, but like I said, I wasn't very good, and I'm not very tall. So those are bad combinations to have if you want to have a professional basketball career. But man, a lot of the thanks goes to my dad. Being able to have a supportive parent. My dad didn't even play sports in middle school and high school or anything like that. But just having a great dad that just wanted to, make sure that his son was active. I was doing baseball, football. I was doing karate. And my dad was taking me to every practice, every game, didn't miss. And so to have that level of support there was really the start of it for me, and to be able to kind of he saw the love that I had, how much I enjoyed it. He never had to push me to do it. I grew up in a town where sports was a big deal, like I mentioned before. And as I got older, I saw how much other parents pushed their kids. They wanted their kids to be, superstars. And I saw the effect that had on a lot of kids as I was growing up, man, that they really didn't love the game. They were playing it because they kind of had to. And I got a chance to, be a beneficiary of not being pushed in that way, where I was able to truly love the game. And in some ways, it was a gift and a curse, because I was kind of a late bloomer, a late developer when it comes to football specifically. But that start was key, and it was just solely based upon my dad opening up everything to me and saying, man, you can do whatever you want to do, and the support was there from the beginning.
Right. So you mentioned t-ball and baseball and karate and football. Which one of those did you kind of gravitate to out of all 3 of those? Was there one specific that you was like, I like all of them, but this one specifically is something I really want to do?
The natural sport was for sure baseball. I always had pretty good hand-eye coordination, and I loved the game. it was one of those things that I was good at from the beginning. I loved football more. I watched football more, but at that point in time, growing up in the 90s, especially being a young black kid, that was kind of like the peak for African American baseball players, man. You had Ken Griffey Jr., you had Albert Bell, you had guys like, Darryl Strawberry, and, the list goes on. Derek Jeter. A lot of people forget that he's black. But these are guys that I grew up on, and they made the game of baseball appealing. And so I got a chance to grow up in that era where it was cool to play baseball. And that was a really cool thing for me, being able to grow up and play the game. But football had a different pull on me that baseball didn't have, and maybe in some ways because there was a lot more action that was taking place. But also, me going to the school that I went to, it was football first. And so those are both things that in one point, in one piece, I was naturally gifted at baseball, but football was the sport that I wanted to maybe make it to professional sports in.
Do you have like any regrets, like leaving baseball behind to pursue football primarily?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier, man. Like, my dad never pushed me in any way, and in some ways, if you have a parent that is pushing you, they're telling you that, like, no, this is what you're gonna do. You see, I'm a big fan of the big baller, LeVar Ball, and just kind of the way that he's going about, raising his kids, and he's been very direct and blunt and honest, and this is what the deal was gonna be. He says that he gave his kids a choice, but really the choice was basketball. Yeah. And in a lot of ways, man, you can see the fruit of that. It turned out pretty well to be able to have 3 kids make it to the NBA in some form or fashion. But I think the regret, it's not necessarily a regret. I knew that I was not gifted enough to pursue both sports at the school that I was at. And I knew that football was going to have to be the thing. And I wish maybe that I could have been talented enough to do both, but I wasn't. And I made the decision to say, man, I'm going to put my all into football. And I feel like in a lot of ways that was a rewarding decision. But, whenever I have kids one day, they might not get the same opportunity to make the choices that I did.
Right. Well, and I think in some instances, like, you may have that parent that pushes you in that direction, but just depending on the kid, just because that parent's pushing you in that direction, you may go the total opposite direction just because of that. And, and obviously you kind of brought up LeVar Ball earlier. Yeah, I think to your point, he played basketball. So, and I think that's what a lot of kids and who parents played, like, you're going to naturally gravitate, whatever your parents did. If your dad played basketball, you want to be like your dad, and you're going to play basketball like he did. So I think there was an initial draw toward that. And then after that, man, those guys, they were just talented. So it just came natural to him, man. And he added the work ethic and things of that nature. So it all worked out in itself. So, okay. So next, I want to ask you. So as a young athlete, do you believe that playing sports changed the way, like, you saw yourself or you viewed yourself when you were playing early on?
Yeah, I think for better and worse, man. A lot of the confidence or the way you view yourself is in relation to the kind of game that you had. So if you had a good game, you're feeling good about yourself. If you had a bad game, you're not. But sports is a mirror. It shows you the good and the bad. And, I believe that I was always a pretty self-aware kid and pretty confident as well. But once again, referring back to the place that I grew up in, it's a small town, Shreveport, Louisiana, but a very talented town. And when it comes to sports, a lot of talent has been produced from this little pool. And growing up in that competitive atmosphere where, man, there are some kids that are extremely gifted and talented. For me, I had to work hard. I didn't have maybe some of the physical gifts. I had maybe the mental. Like I said, the hand-eye coordination, some of those things. But in a lot of ways, man, it made me have that chip on my shoulder. that I knew I was going to have to work hard. I was going to have to be the one to do a little bit extra in order to put myself in a position to play, because I was in a lot of spaces and environments where the people that are around were really gifted. So that shaped me, even through the rest of my life, man, having that mentality that like the work comes first. If you put in the work, I realized at an early age, if you put in the work, you'll reap the benefits from it in some form or fashion. And if you're not reaping the benefits from it, then you got to put in more work. There's just more work. And you learn those lessons. You learn those lessons early on.
Right. And you mentioned that earlier. So as it relates to just coming up, playing at a young age, like, is that something that, as it relates to like hard work? That's something that a lot of people are taught at a young age when they do play sports. Is that something that came natural to you, working hard, or is that something that, you know, you had to be motivated to work hard? Like, all right, let me show you how to work hard. Because I can just speak for myself. I didn't really learn how to really work hard probably until late into my high school years, and really, really, truly into college is when I like, all right, this is what hard work really looks like. Because, you know, just for me, I didn't have a lot of people that could show me that. They showed me how to play. They showed me what to do. But, you know, showing you how to play and showing you technique and things of that nature is totally different from showing you how to work hard.
And I think there's a difference between, and sometimes they can be the same, but there's a difference between hard work and productive work. And I think I was put in environments where the hard work was like the minimum. Like that is what it was going to be regardless. And then I was fortunate enough to be around coaches that there was going to be very productive work. There was going to be high level technique that was taught. There was going to be foundation that was built. And so you can do the minimum, which was the hard work that everybody else was doing. And if you do that in the places that I was in, then you're still just going to be wherever you were, because the people that are more talented than you, they're working hard too. So they're still going to be better than you at every step along the way. And, you know, I was fortunate enough to you know, have even, you know, people like you in my life whenever I got, you know, to high school, that there was going to have to be another level of work that was going to be applied. But I can say that I had the mentality at a young age that like there wasn't an attractiveness to hard work to me. Like I was never scared of it. I welcomed it. Sometimes there's that love-hate relationship, obviously, that every athlete will tell you about. There's nothing fun about getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning. There's nothing fun about, you know, afternoon workouts in the Louisiana heat and humidity. That's not fun. The fun is the payoff when those lights come on. And, you know, from an early age, I realized that if you want the glory, you want people in the stands cheering for you, you want to be playing and not riding the bench, you want the attention from the girls, you want the attention from, you know, the coaches and those things, you're going to have to put in the work.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, so you attended Evangel Christian Academy, the Screaming Eagles, as I like to call them. So can you tell me a little bit about like the culture there at Evangel? Because just, you know, for a lot of people who maybe not be familiar with Evangel, they're at one point for many years were a perennial powerhouse in football in Shreveport, Louisiana. Multiple state championships, multiple district championships. They just had a overall identity of winning and being consistent in winning in the sport of football. So could you tell me a little bit about the culture there and you know, your time there and how you saw things?
Yeah, absolutely. The E, you know, it's in me. That's a huge part of my life as well. Thinking about things currently, it's kind of like being, I would imagine, like guys from Miami feel when they see the current state of the program and they're like, man, this ain't what it's supposed to be. Like, I know what it's like when it's rolling, when it's the glory days, and you hope for those things to return, and you realize that, man, sometimes those things are for a specific period in time, and it's tough to get back to that place. But, you know, I was a little bit different in my attachment to Evangel in that, I was there throughout my entire schooling, from the beginning to me graduating high school. Us being an athletic factory, a football factory. A lot of guys, that played sports that went on to college, they were brought in from other places around town. But there was just always that level of excellence, of competition, of just high level coaching, community. There was an understanding of hard work. There was an understanding of the foundation and the principles, obviously, of Christ, which is still, I think the most important piece of the Evangel story is that Christ came first, and that was the foundation that this platform, this football platform, it was to elevate Christ, and then through that you have a lot of talent, a lot of guys that came through from an early age. I remember my first experiences with Evangel football, being 6, 7, 8 years old, going to Rodney Durham Field on a Friday night. This is when things were rolling in the early 90s, mid 90s. You got guys like Philip Dees, guys like Brock Berlin, Richard Smith, Abram Booty, Chase Pittman, Cole Pittman, Byron Dawson, Philip Giger. The list goes on, man, of guys that I got a chance to watch being a kid, man, and like that they were like superstars and celebrities to me on Friday nights, coming to a packed out stadium, and then getting the opportunity as kids, man, going to the field that was behind us and playing tackle football and trying to be like our heroes were those guys. It wasn't necessarily college guys, and obviously you have love for the NFL guys as well, but man, those were our heroes. Those were the celebrities to us. When those guys came and visited the elementary campus, we wanted their autographs. They were Shreveport superstars. And to be able to see that up close and in person, it does something to you, man. It creates a perspective and a desire to want to be great. You want to be in that position one day. You want to be able to come run out that tunnel with the smoke coming out and run through that banner on a Friday night and play a top opponent and get your name in the paper and all of those things. But the piece of that was the greatest thing in all of that was the work. It was that there was no off season. A state championship could have been won in December, and by the middle or end of January, the next season is beginning. And your early mornings, freezing cold, putting in the work. The summer, you're putting in the work. It was that we are putting in the work in order to obtain a goal, and the goal was always to reach the Superdome. That was it. There was nothing else other than that. There was no success to a season other than winning a state championship. We weren't there for participation. We weren't there to go along, to get along. We were there to dominate. And that mentality, shapes you, man, early on as a kid. Like, I want to win. I'm here to win. I'm here to get better. I'm here to be pushed. You get very comfortable with people coaching you hard, talking to you in ways that most people in the outside world would probably go and report these people to HR, if you're being talked to in that kind of way. But that's how I grew up. I grew up with that. I grew up with coaches coaching you. And if they weren't coaching you, then you were doing something wrong. You watch some of these shows like Last Chance U, and you see the way that some of these kids handle coaching and how much they are opposed to it in a lot of ways. And for me, I watch this stuff and I'm like, man, that's what I knew growing up. Right. A coach kind of talking to you bad, and you have to deal with it. You couldn't go run to your parents because that's just what it was, man. It was that level of accountability, and that's the biggest piece I think as well, was that accountability. There was other kids. You're from Shreveport. You grew up. You played sports. You know what the talent is like where we come from. There's talent. Yeah. There is elite level talent. Guys that should have been in the NFL, NBA, MLB, but maybe they didn't have the same opportunity to be coached in the way that I got a chance to be coached at Evangel. And that was the biggest piece, man, of my upbringing for sure, is the Evangel piece.
And I would say that too. Like, and I guess I'm a little curious on your viewpoint now. Yes, I would absolutely agree. How kids were coached in the 80s, 90s, and even the early 2000s is not the same as it is today. It is in some pockets, but as you see, things changed, and kids are, I guess, have a lot more ownership in their positions and in the way they see themselves. They're not taking a lot of that old school coaching that they used to nowadays, and kids will definitely quickly talk back to a coach, or not show up to a practice, or do whatever they feel is necessary not to feel like they being played or embarrassed, or or any of those things in front of any of their teammates. So it's a lot more being concerned about keeping your respect or not being disrespected by a coach and things of that nature. So I know a lot of the old school coaches are having a tough time making that adjustment.
Yeah.
But there's definitely an adjustment that has to be made, because the kids have changed, generations have changed. So there has to be a shift. There has to be an audible by coaches in general, how they're moving forward coaching. Now, as it relates to like the NFL or anything like that, that's a little different, obviously, because they're being paid. But when we're looking at this on an amateur level, and you're looking at high school and even college, there's a significant shift in how coaches are addressing players, whether that's one-on-one or in front of a group, because those kids nowadays, they're just not taking it. So do you see that being a problem, or do you see that just being a overall dynamic shift in how kids are being coached, and kids maybe just not putting up with it anymore?
Yeah, it's an interesting time. I would imagine it's a very interesting time to be a coach. In a lot of ways, we can go super deep with this question, because in a lot of ways, specifically to our community, a lot of this is related to a lot of kids now growing up in single parent homes, and shout out to the majority of single mothers that are having to shoulder the burden of maybe playing roles that they're not necessarily supposed to have to play. But for me, I was blessed to be able to grow up in a 2-parent household, so I understood what it was like to have a male figure in the house that I had to be accountable to, that was going to tell me certain things to do, and I had to be obedient to that and be comfortable with that. And that just extends to the playing field or the court or the diamond. Those things extend. And you brought up, like, kids not wanting to be embarrassed of, man, he's playing me. And some of those insecurities maybe come from a place of not having that consistent male figure in their life. Even in school, man, I got an opportunity to substitute teach. There's not a lot of male teachers. Specifically in our community, there's not a lot of black male teachers. So a lot of these kids are not used to having a male figure that they have to be accountable to in that way. And so I think coaches have to adapt, obviously, because, to be honest, even though we grew up that way and we were able to make it through, some of the things that were done and said shouldn't be done or said. Those things don't have to be a part of the sporting experience. You don't have to be Bob Knight. You don't have to be, these guys that are all in your face and yelling and spitting and berating you and demeaning you. It doesn't have to be that way. You can be Tony Dungy and have success. You can be a guy that can talk to you as a man or a young man and hold you accountable, but the accountability comes from a place of love and trust and respect. And I think that's the biggest piece now. Right. Is the coaches have to do a better job of setting that foundation of trust. These kids want to know, can I trust you? If they can trust you, then you can coach them, but they're not going to give their trust easily. Maybe back in the day, we just gave it because that's just what you do. But these kids are not going to just give it. And in a lot of ways, man, rightfully so. that trust needs to be earned. And then on the other end, for the athlete, they have to be okay and secure enough to understand, what I got a chance to understand is if the coach ain't coaching you, he doesn't think you're worth being coached. If you're running through a drill and nobody says anything, it's probably not because you did the drill perfect. It's probably because the coach doesn't ever think that you're worth the time to coach you. So move along, and next person goes through. And these kids have to get to the place where they understand that the coaching is in a lot of ways affirmation. And so there has to be a lot more, I think, communication that's had between the coach and the player. Maybe some of these coaches feel like they don't have to explain themselves to kids, but there's nothing wrong with questions being asked. There's nothing wrong with somebody saying, "Coach, why are we doing this?" And if the coach is too prideful to be able to provide context behind why we're doing this, then maybe they're in the wrong business as well.
Well, and I guess that's a slippery slope, because I think a lot of the older school coaches, they're not too keen to answering some of those questions, and that's just a pride thing from my perspective. Like, a lot of coaches don't want to be questioned. And don't get me wrong, as newer coaches come in, as younger coaches come in, if you truly want 100% buy-in from your player and your program, man, communicating the why is super important, and that's even with any organization. Like, if you're communicating the why, then people will have that much more buy-in, because they understand the whole picture, and not just, I'm coming in here to do X to produce Y. If I can see the entire picture and understand, the whole process, and that's gonna make me that much better of a player. It's gonna make me that much better of an employee. And that way, I can have a true understanding of what makes the whole thing go in the direction that it goes in. But going back to some of your time at Evangel. So correct me if I'm wrong, but during your time in high school, you won 3 state championships. Is that accurate? Three state titles. Was that sophomore, junior, and senior? Excuse me. Senior year.
Correct. Yeah. Back to back. Three titles. Let me make sure I'm getting that right, because there was a year. My freshman year we lost in the Superdome to Hanville. That was actually Jacob Hester's senior year. That Hanville team was incredible. It was a high-scoring game, and Darius Renard, who ended up playing for the Vikings, I believe, played for Hanville, and they put on a show, and they ended up winning my freshman year. But 3 state titles, sophomore through senior year.
Mm-hmm. So obviously a lot of people don't win 1 state championship, let alone 3. So you spoke a little bit earlier about Chase Pittman, Cole Pittman, Phillip D, some of those guys that came over and spent time with you guys, and you can see the work ethic that they put in. You can actually touch those guys. And then as you get into that opportunity, into that position to play for state championships, then you kind of have a little bit of an aha moment to see, like, all right, everything those guys showed me, everything I've seen those guys actually physically do, now it's time for me to do it. And the model's already there. Can you maybe speak to having a blueprint and a model that you can already fashion and fit right into, and know that it's going to garner success if you just follow the blueprint?
Yeah, the blueprint was there. The system was there. You knew what the schedule was going to be year-round, and you were required to put in that work. There was a formula that if this work is put in, it equals a championship. And so that is, in some ways, because, I was so used to seeing it, that was kind of the easy part, because that was understood. I think from the outside looking in, when you're younger, because you're seeing these state titles back to back to back, you're seeing a national title, you're seeing 15-0, you're seeing 60-0, you're seeing these great feats, you believe that it's a rite of passage, that the championship is a rite of passage. So whenever I get here, then there's supposed to be a championship. And each championship that I was a part of, there was a different perspective and story related to it. My sophomore year, the only time that I really played was garbage time. I didn't really have anything to do with that championship other than being on scout team and providing great looks, right? And that was a really talented team my sophomore year that won the state title, and I got a chance to see that, be a part of it, learn from a lot of unheralded guys that maybe in the Evangel mythology a lot of people don't know about. Guys like Rashad Bratton, who in my opinion is probably the most underrated linebacker in Evangel history. Nobody talks enough about guys like him. He was a heck of a player, and I got a chance to kind of get under his wing and see how he worked. And he was just such a humble guy, and he allowed me to kind of be a part of conversations and things that as a young player, man, it was so beneficial to me. My junior year, I got a chance to play. Probably into the second or third game of the season, I eventually became a starter. I was a late bloomer, a late developer. So that was my first chance to actually have to put in the work for a title. And that was a special experience in itself. But, to be honest, I don't think I was that great of a player my junior year. So even though I was a starter and I did my piece, I guess you could say, and in some ways was successful, had some really great games, but I still don't feel like I was an integral part. I was a part, definitely a bigger part than I was my sophomore year. And so that championship has a special place because it was me finally starting to come into my own and understand the responsibility. When you get to your senior year, it's all on you. The spotlight is on you. If you don't bring home a title, then you are in a community in Evangel football lore that you don't want to be in. It's a very small community of guys that did not win a state title their senior year. You do not want to end up there in that place. And there's a lot of guys that will probably tell you that they don't like being in that place. And so my senior year, the responsibility is now mine. I have become a great player. I have become a vocal leader. And, I was the guy that was giving the speeches before the game to the defense. I was the guy that was, breaking us down. I was, relaying the plays from our great defensive coordinator, Ronnie Alexander, and leading a team, being truly a team leader. And going through that playoff run my senior year was different because when the game's on the line now, it's not up to anybody else. It's up to you. And we had a very challenging playoff run. We played some really great teams, and there were some touch and go moments where it's like, man, I hope this thing works out. You don't want to end up in the community of guys that don't have that chip their senior year. But that senior year title, man, is so special to me because I know what it took, and I know my journey as developing as a player. The offseason going into that, the work that was put in to get to a place where I was so confident in my abilities that I felt like, in a room of talented people and gifted people, I felt like I was the best. And maybe I wasn't, but my mentality was that I was. And it was such a special time and moment in my life to be able to win that title my senior year.
Right. And as you kind of look at that now, like just going through it, did you even know like the significance of coming through winning 3 state championships? And then as you look at it now, like, as you talk to people and have different stories about sports, and you kind of like, hey, well, we won 3 state championships. And then you talk to somebody else and be like, well, we never made the playoffs.
Yeah, I think I came into that realization once I got to LSU. And you have a lot of guys from all over, and they were super talented, 4-star, 5-star guys, and they never won a title. They maybe made it to the playoffs. They never got a chance to have those experiences. But I think because I was such a sports nerd, I kind of understood the significance. And I think in a lot of ways that helped me give perspective to a team that I was leading. Was that we were in a special moment. We had an opportunity to do something important and special, and this thing isn't going to come back around again. And so because I was at Evangel my entire life, I had a level of perspective that maybe other people didn't have, and I was able to understand the significance that maybe other people don't get to till you're older and you have kids and you're telling your kids about these stories that you have from high school. I understood those things while I was in it, which might be a little bit more unique to that experience.
Right. So, just speak to like the current state of the Evangel program. Obviously, if you don't know,
you're gonna give me a hot water, man. You're gonna get me banished from the Evangel community.
Well, and we just spoke about a lot of the state championships. I can't rack up the number. I believe all in all, man, you guys maybe have close to 20 state championships from Class 1A to 5A as you guys kind of moved up and down. But last year was a tough year. You guys were 0-8. And I don't know if that was the first time ever that you guys had a year or a season to where you didn't win a game. I'm just a little curious on your perspective on that. And do you currently have any relationships with any coaches there? And what's your conversations with other fellow teammates that you played with, or people that you even know at the school, as it relates to like how things have kind of spiraled downward as it relates to the football program?
Yeah, that's yeah. So there's a lot of layers to that question. I'll try and tackle them one at a time. But it goes back to what I was saying earlier, man. I would imagine how those guys from Miami feel that you always want more involvement because you believe that you have a perspective. I also am very aware of my placement in the pecking order of what it comes to in terms of Evangel importance. So I'm very aware of that as well. But what I will say is I probably have a different attachment and desire than most people have because I spent my entire upbringing in adolescence there. And so, it pains me whenever I see the program not in the place of where I know it should be. I have conversations with guys. There's text messages that come through sometimes when some of these scores came through last year and even over the years of like, man, what's going on? And it's unfortunate because I believe Evangel plays a really important role in the city of Shreveport. I believe Evangel played an important role in the state of Louisiana. A lot of teams, took their blueprint from Evangel in the 90s and in the early 2000s with the things that we were doing when it comes to spread offense and the concepts. Those are things that we were doing, in the 90s, in the early 2000s. And those became, pretty much gospel for football now that what we're seeing in terms of people throwing the ball around 40, 50, 60 times a game. So, the biggest piece is, man, we were spoiled. We always had elite level quarterbacks. We always had, top level prospects. And it starts there, honestly. If you got a guy back there that can pull the trigger, it starts from that place. So maybe there's been a little bit of, or maybe they're waiting on the next guy. They're waiting on the next guy to come. A child shall lead them. So they're waiting on that guy to come that has that special anointing, I guess, that it takes to be the signal caller at Evangel. But, I think for them, they need to maybe do a better job of welcoming back some of the guys that have the love of the school and the program and want to maybe. It's one thing for the top level guys to come back and maybe lend their perspective, but sometimes guys need to hear from the guys that were just workers, man. Right. Guys like I just spoke about Rashad Bratton. Those are names that like nobody mentions in Evangel. This was an amazing guy that had high character and integrity, was a hard worker, and was a heck of a player. I think guys like that need to be more involved with what's going on with the program, that have that level of commitment to see maybe looking at other guys that maybe weren't 6'3", 6'4", blue chip guys, but they need to be able to come back and be welcome into the community to hopefully get this thing back to where it needs to be.
Okay. So coming out of your senior year, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were all district first team.
That is correct.
So how was your process and your planning and even the dialogue with your coaches coming out of your senior year? Obviously, you had a state championship behind you. You had some all district honors. The next step is to kind of move forward and to play collegiately. So what kind of conversations did you have with your coaches? What kind of conversations did you have with your parents as you were looking to extend your football career?
Yeah, I kind of was my own agent. I represented myself. I was, I'm 5'11" on a good day, and I understand by being a fan of the game. I understand that because I was a late developer, that I wasn't going to be getting the calls maybe from the places that I felt like I deserved to get them from. So I had to do the work, and the coaches are gonna gravitate towards the guys that they know that they can get scholars to these places, and I understood that. So I had to get on the road, man. I felt like Master P. I had my highlight tape in the trunk, and so any city that I was popping up at, I was trying to pass that thing out to whoever would take it from me. And so I knew that because I was such a fan of the game, fan of college football growing up. I was a big Florida State fan, so all those teams, that's who I rooted for. I knew that I wanted to be at a big school, and maybe I wasn't going to get a scholarship to a top-level D1 program, but I knew that I could compete, and I just wanted the opportunity. The story of me, and fortunately for me, I definitely want to give kudos and shout out Coach Byron Dawson. He played at Evangel. He was All-American. He's one of the Evangel legends in every way, from as a player, as a student, as a coach. Is a great man, high integrity, and because of the relationships that he had at LSU, he was able to open up a door for me to be able to have an opportunity to even have the conversation. And the story of me even getting the opportunity to get my highlight CD in the hands of Coach Ralph Nader at LSU legend. He's still around the program. I ended up going to a junior day with a friend of mine, and I was just hanging out with him. And it just so happened that I had one of my highlight tapes in the trunk. And during the time that the players were in at Live Cook hanging around, I went and grabbed my highlight tape, ran it back in, got it in the hands of Coach Nader. And Coach Byron Dawson had already sent in a letter on my behalf, so there was a lot of things working at the time. And he ended up looking at the tape. And, man, probably a couple weeks later, I got a handwritten letter saying, man, we would love to have you be a part of the program as a preferred walk-on. And that was, man, just an amazing moment for me, because I knew that I just wanted the opportunity to go to a big school. I wanted an opportunity to go be a part. I came from a winning program, a high-level program. No disrespect to the guys that go and get it out the mud and go to some of these smaller places. But for me, I wanted to continue on in a place of excellence, and LSU ended up providing that for me. And even to continue on with that story, I was at your wedding whenever I got the phone call at the end of that summer going into my freshman year to be a part of the fall camp. And so not a lot of freshman walk-ons get to be a part their freshman year of fall camp. If you are a part of the walk-on community, you know that that's a big deal. And shout out to the walk-ons that have make us look good, like Baker Mayfield and guys like that. But to be a part of that 105 at that time, that was the 105-man roster. That means that you're going to get a chance to be a part of the roster for opening day, for that opening Saturday night. And so, I remember getting that voicemail, literally leaving from your wedding reception, packing up my stuff and heading down to Baton Rouge to be a part of a fall camp, man.
Right. Well, there's a lot of good things happening on that day. I can see.
Yeah, absolutely.
But no, that's even good to hear about. That Coach Dawson, kind of wrote a letter for you, and that just kind of speaks to like that brotherhood. And he could, even though maybe you guys didn't play together, he could vouch for your character. He could vouch for your game and things of that nature, just because you guys were part of the same organization, part of the same goals, had the same morals, had the same expectations, had the same work ethic. So for the most part, it was almost just a no-brainer for him to write that letter, man, and kind of push you along to recommend you to play for the program. And it's kind of hard for them to look the other direction. If somebody who came down there and played and played at a high level would take time out to write a letter on your behalf to let them know that, hey, you need to give this guy a shot, and he's going to come in.
Absolutely. And we stand on the shoulders of those that came before us. And for me, and up until that point, there hadn't been a ton of black coaches at Evangel. Mm-hmm. And so, I definitely want to highlight Byron Dawson, and because he is in a lot of ways a pioneer. And to be able to have someone like that, for me, that like we oftentimes butted heads my senior year, but it was out of a place of love for the game, and at that point in time, he was a defensive line coach, and so he had a way that he saw his D line going, and there were times that we probably got into it, but the level of respect was there that I had for him, and I think he knew that. He knew how much I appreciated him, and he did, man. He stuck his neck out for me. Maybe I didn't repay that in the way that I would have wanted to extend my career at LSU, which I'm sure we'll get into. But he was a very important piece in providing an opportunity for me to end up where I wanted to be.
Right. So yeah, on LSU's official roster, they had you listed at 5'10", 208. So I know we didn't mention this earlier, but you played middle linebacker. And if anybody knew anything about the game, that's a little bit undersized, to say the least. So you're hitting to this, for the most part, top 5, top 10 program, playing with blue chip athletes that's coming in from all over the state and all over the country. Did you feel like you belonged when you got there and started playing? Did you feel like you some things you needed to work on when you got a chance to get into camp and could start working with a couple of the guys? Did you like, okay, these guys are not that far off from where I'm at, or maybe even I'm better than some of these guys? Like, how was your perspective when you got into camp for the first time?
From day one, I felt like I belonged, and I had put in the work, and so I felt confident in that. Definitely undersized for the linebacker position. And also, they don't fudge your numbers when you're a walk-on. If I would have been a 5-star, man, I would have been probably 6'1", 220 listed. But when you're a walk-on, man, they just give you the numbers of whatever you got, and you got to take it and move along. But from day one, I felt like I belonged. I made friends immediately. I was confident. I didn't think that these guys were some superstars or anything like that. I thought that they were regular guys that were really good. And then, like you said, you get there and you see some of these guys up close and in person. And there's absolutely guys that are elite level. They're a part of the 1%ers. And you know that they're going to play in the NFL. They're going to have long careers. And it is what it is. But then there's some guys that maybe were 3-star, 4-star, 5-star. And I felt like I was a better football player than them.
Right.
They might have been better athletes, but I felt like I was a better football player. And so from day one, stepping into fall camp, it was a life-changing experience because you are in 100-degree heat, and it's time to go to work.
Right.
And it gets nasty out there, and it's a part of it's a part of being in the jungle at LSU. That's what we call it. And I was able to see elite level talent and physicality up close and in person. and you know that if you don't come out there with your chin strap buckled and your shoulder pads latched on good, it's not going to be a good day for you. And so it was an immediate understanding that, like, man, you can get hurt out here, so you better come with it. And but there was never a time that I felt like, oh man, I'm over my head. Right. I always feel like I belong.
Do you feel like as a walk on you got a fair shake from the coaching staff as it relates to like opportunities?
That's a great question. I think every walk on will probably give you a different perspective. I also think it matters what your head coach's focus was. So, I played under Coach Les Miles, who we know is going through some things right now, but that's who I played under. And he was an offensive line guy. So he wasn't spending a ton of time with the defense. I think as a walk-on, you have a better opportunity if you, one, potentially play on defense, but if your coach isn't focused on that. Like his focus was offense. I got a chance, I played defense. And so it was, in some ways, man, if you're good enough, you're going to end up making your way to the field. And so, ultimately my career was cut short due to myself. But I had support from my position coaches. I had support from my defensive coordinator. At the time, it was Bo Pelini. And he let me know, man, after spring ball, going into my sophomore year, that, man, he believed that I could play, and that I could play there and I could be a contributor. And I believe that as well. So I would say that I did get a fair shake in terms of, I felt like if things would have continued on, I would have eventually had the opportunity to potentially, at the very least, be a strong contributor on special teams. And at the most, man, I felt like I could have absolutely made my way into a rotational role, or even potentially maybe by the time my senior year got there, to be a starter.
All right. So, okay. Coming into, like you said, mentioned earlier, you came in, walked on, had opportunity to kind of get in there and get your feet wet initially. So you go through your freshman year, getting high praise from defensive coordinator. So coming into your sophomore year, you just got more to prove. So can you speak to like your transition from coming into your freshman year to sophomore year, and what adjustments you didn't make or didn't make to be prepared for your second season?
Yeah, my freshman year was the best of times and the worst of times. Not having to worry about playing on Saturdays opened up the world of possibilities as being a student athlete at LSU in Baton Rouge. And my freshman class was, to put it kindly, we were a bunch of hooligans, and we took full advantage of everything that LSU can offer after the sun goes down. And so at one point in time, I got banned from the weight room from my strength and conditioning coach, who is another LSU legend, Tommy Moffitt. There's a lot of stories that can be told as a part of that in that period in my life, and ending up, I was probably the only walk-on. I was a part of the initial class at LSU of what they call the Breakfast Club, which was for guys who were struggling in class, that you have to wake up early in the morning to go get tutoring.
Right.
So
but you can't just come and say you got banned from the weight room without providing any context to that. Like,
man, to be honest, I don't even remember why I got banned from the weight room. Okay. I genuinely don't remember. Coach Moffitt took a liking to me, and by taking a liking to me, I mean that he was going to make sure I had it tough. And some of that, man, as being an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, I didn't carry myself like a walk-on, and I think he probably expected that from me. I carried myself like I was one of the guys, like the guys that I were hanging around. I was hanging around the guys that people were, that were having their highlights on SportsCenter. Those are my friends. That's who I was spending my time around. I really wasn't hanging around other walk-ons. So the way that I saw myself maybe he didn't appreciate that. And so for whatever reason that I got banned or that he wanted to make an example out of me, maybe it was deserved, maybe it wasn't. It's water under the bridge for me, but he was definitely the man in position of power, and I was the lowest person on the totem pole that you can be, and he made sure that I knew that at every turn. But going into after we won a national championship, so being a part of that was such an amazing experience, and being able to win a national championship in Louisiana at the Superdome, which the team from a couple of years ago got a chance to experience. There's nothing like that. And then going into the offseason, man, I made it a point that I was going to put in the work that was going to be needed. And I did. I had a great offseason, had a great fourth quarter program, had a great spring game. I had an interception in the spring game, had a great spring game. And so I felt confident going into that summer and that I was going to continue to progress. And, I was a victim of my own maybe lack of self-control at the time, and ended up making some mistakes, ended up missing a trip to go see the President of the United States of America. And because of that, because of partying, and a combination of partying and being a walk-on, I was expendable, and I am a very unique case of a walk-on that got a chance to walk into Les Miles' office and for him to personally kick you off of the team.
So what was that conversation like when
get out? The conversation was get out. The conversation was see you later. The conversation was we don't want to hear anything else from you. You are a walk-on, and you are carrying yourself like you're not, and we want to make sure that you understand that. There was no conversation. It was me making up a story as to why I ended up missing the flight, which was complete BS. And he obviously, it really doesn't matter what story I would have told.
It didn't matter at that point.
The Grim Reaper was coming. I'll never forget, man. I can laugh at this stuff now, man, because hopefully I'm over the trauma of the situation. But I remember walking up to the football ops building and going upstairs and seeing someone like my position coaches and people that like I had great relationships with. Mm-hmm. They couldn't even look me in my eyes, man. So I knew something was up. Right. And I walked into Coach Miles' office and gave my BS story of why I missed the trip, man, or something I said about maybe my tire was on flat. Now, understand that the football ops building was about maybe a 15-minute walk tops from my apartment. So that story didn't jive well with him. Yeah. But regardless, man, the boot was coming, and I got a chance to receive that.
Right. Well, and I know that, yeah, like you said, with you being coming in a walk-on, they didn't necessarily have all that much invested in you. And even that much more, they can make an example for everybody else.
Correct.
That maybe wasn't in line. So
yeah,
but
there's gonna be some names that I will not mention. I will protect their anonymity in this. But there was other guys that either were late to the trip or missed the trip completely as well. And all I'll say is I was the only one to get kicked off the team, and we will leave it at that. But honestly, it was probably deserved. My grades were horrible, and I was wilding out. And whether or not he did it with the intention of trying to hold me accountable, or he did it because he can make an example out of me, I look at that now and I'm appreciative of that. And at the end of the day, my name is etched in stone in front of Tiger Stadium for that national championship. They can never get rid of me, baby.
Well, no, I mean, to your point, yeah. Like, what if nothing happened when you missed that flight, man? Who knows what you would have continued to move forward and do if you wasn't held accountable for missing that flight.
Yeah, and it goes back to what we were saying earlier, man. Even when it comes to the coaching piece, like accountability sucks, man, and sometimes it hurts, but it is beneficial in the long run. And I definitely didn't understand it fully then, and even through the course of my life, even up until the age that I am now. Those lessons, man, that you learn. There's a verse in the Bible that says, "Whom the Lord loves, He corrects." No chastisement feels good in the present.
In the present, right?
But in the end, man, it provides something that is beneficial. And I didn't understand some of those things then, and maybe if I would have been able to slide through, I would have continued on that. But I had to pay the price for some of the decisions that I made, and it was deserved.
Right. So what would you tell like current athletes coming up, like guys in high school or in college? Like, what advice would you give them now? Being that you've kind of been through all that you've been through, what one or two pieces of information would you be able to glean and drop off to those guys now?
Yeah, and I've tried to give these bits of information throughout, probably the last 10 years of my life in dealing with young people. But to answer your question, a few things. One, obviously take advantage of the time that you have. College is meant to be experienced. You're meant to meet new people. You're meant to go have a good time and enjoy yourself. But with that being said, it's a 4-year period, and I would say if you put your head down and you're able to discipline yourself in a way that you understand what you want to get out of those 4 years that you're never going to get back again. You're never going to. There's a small percentage of guys that make the league. There's a small percentage of guys that play college, but an even smaller percentage that make the league. If you get an opportunity to be at some of these programs, even as a walk-on, but some of these big-time programs, one, take advantage of the network that is provided to you. Even as a walk-on, you get access to things and to environments and to people that as a regular student you would never have access to. So take advantage of those. Have a mentality that you want to build relationships with people that might be beneficial to you later on in your life. And then the other piece would be, man, always weigh, is it worth it or not? And when I say weigh, is it worth it or not, is going out on a Wednesday night worth it or not in the grand scheme of things? Probably not. Is having that drink and getting in your car and driving worth it or not? Definitely not. Being mindful of the environments that you're in, that you have a very small window of opportunity to make the most out of a situation, and do that. Don't get in your own way. Right. I live by a quote, and I originally heard this from LeBron James, but it is progress over pride. Sometimes our pride gets us in trouble. We are stubborn, and we believe that we deserve certain things or that we can do whatever. There's a level of invincibility that you have as a young man that as you get older, you realize that you don't really have. And to have that mentality that, like, man, I'm not going to be so stubborn, so prideful that I miss out on lessons and greatness that only humility can provide. Mm-hmm. And being able to approach things from a humble place of knowing that, like, man, I have a chance here that maybe people before me didn't have, maybe people from my hometown didn't have, people from that grew up how I grew up didn't have. Take advantage of it. You might not be the guy that gets drafted first round. You might not be the guy that gets that free agent call. You might be the guy that just plays for 4 years. Maybe you never become a starter. Maybe you're just a part of the team. But man, there's so much that you can get just from that. So take advantage of it.
Right. No, I think that's all great advice. And the conversations I have with like younger guys and younger players now is like, focus on the education piece, because no matter what happens, football will end up coming to an end. As you get older, your ability to play the game will diminish, but nobody can take that education away from you. And if you can leverage that opportunity into education from any 4-year university or organization, like, it's going to be super beneficial. But also to kind of understand the moment. Like once you get on campus, like that clock is ticking, whether you know it or not, the clock is ticking. So to kind of understand that this is, for the most part, a once in a lifetime opportunity for most people, you have to take it extremely seriously. Which I think most people coming into college as 17, 18-year-olds, they don't necessarily understand the moment per se.
And it's hard to have that perspective at that age.
It is, and that's why I think it's that much more important that we're having those kind of conversations about like what you're doing today at 18 and 19 is going to be impacting you when you're 39 and 40. Like those decisions that you make then, whether even if you made some mistakes, which we all do, and then you have to course correct and you circle back and you still go back and do whatever you need to do, whether that's a vocational, educational degree, whatever you have to do, that's still time that you didn't have to spend, going back and doing those things if you would have taken care of business up front. But to the point that you were making earlier, I don't think most, I'm not going to say all, but I don't think most, 18, 19 years coming into those situations understand that this is a very brief opportunity, is a very narrow window. The path is very small. So for you to have that perspective to understand, like, those parties will be there, all those people will still be there. Well, some of them will be there, some of them will be gone. That's just kind of the nature of it. And you'll have access to all that stuff in a given time when it's necessary. But keep your head down, take care of the work, man. Like the work is most important, whether that's schoolwork or on the field, on the court, wherever it is. That is the primary focus when it comes down to it, because
and it's bigger than us, and it's hard to have that perspective when you are that age. But as a black man, and these things need to be discussed and talked about. As a young black man, we have to even understand that. I was a beneficiary of, like I mentioned before, of Byron Dawson, of him doing the right things at LSU, right? So 10 plus years down the road, I was able to benefit from somebody doing the right things.
Right.
And I wish that I would have had that level of understanding and perspective when I got my opportunity. And in some ways, I still opened up pathways and doors for other people as well. But it could have been even far greater. And I didn't have that level of maturity to understand that. And I want to make sure that young people understand that, man, it's bigger than you. And if you do the right things, man, not only do you open up an opportunity for yourself, man, but there might be somebody that comes along behind you that's going to be a beneficiary of that as well.
Right, absolutely. So circling back, like you said, you met with Coach Miles. He gave you walking papers. So what were your initial plans after you knew you weren't going to be playing football anymore? Was it, could you kind of expound on that?
Depression. My plan after that was depression. It was being holed up in my apartment. It was, I think my girlfriend at the time ended up breaking up with me. I think I was holed up a lot. There was no plan. I had an opportunity to go other places and play. And I didn't want to leave the hold of Baton Rouge and of being at LSU. It had me, and I realize even now, you talk about loving the game. I realized that I didn't even love the game as much as I thought I did. I was so immature at the time that I just loved being in Baton Rouge more than I even loved football, and I thought I loved football. I could have went to other places and played and continued my career, and I didn't. My plan was, initially, it was to eventually get back on the team. I had guys like Derry Beckwith, another LSU great. He tried to ask Coach Miles to let me back, and the answer was no. And I eventually thought I was going to be back on the team, and I wasn't. And I didn't have a plan. And in a lot of ways, man, a lot of athletes don't. Right. Whether your career gets cut short because you get kicked off the team, or your career comes to an end because you have no more opportunities to play. Most of us don't have a plan. And it's important to have one. It's important to understand that even if you make it to the league, you might, if you are super fortunate, blessed, amazingly gifted, you might get 3 years out of it, tops. Right. You still need to have a plan. And the plan is what saves you. And that way you don't have to end up in the ether. You're just floating around. You don't have any purpose. You don't have anything to put your focus into. You don't have a redirection. Your identity is your sport. My identity at that point in time was being an LSU football player. It was a great identity to have. It's an intoxicating identity. It's an identity that provides you with things that I would say, 90% of men that walk this earth will never get to experience. I got to experience being a part of a national championship football program. But I didn't understand the gravity, and I didn't have an understanding of what the process needed to be once those plans got cut short quicker than what maybe they could have been. And I spent a lot of time, man, lost, to be honest. Right. I didn't even want to watch games that next year. I didn't even want to be around the stadium. My apartment, literally you can hear the screams from Tiger Stadium from my apartment. You can hear that on a Saturday. So just imagine, being a young kid, you had just come from this peak of being a national champion. You felt like eventually you were going to get an opportunity to be a contributor, true contributor. And now your Saturday nights are spent hearing people cheer in a stadium that a few months before you were running through the tunnel in. It is humbling to a degree of, at the time, that I didn't even understand. I just felt shame. You feel shame, and I think a lot of guys, after their careers are over, that's what they feel. They're no longer, I still see guys, man, they hadn't played college ball in 10 years, and they still have that they played football somewhere in their Instagram bio. They can't leave it. They can't shake it. Right. They might still have their football number in their Twitter handle or whatever. That's who they are. They don't feel like people can see them unless they see them as themselves at their peak. And it's important to understand that, like, football is a small piece, and maybe it can provide a platform. But ultimately, that's not who you are. I'm not a football player. I'm somebody who played football. I'm Lydell Smith. I am someone who was created with a purpose that was much bigger and larger than just playing a sport. And it took me a long time to understand that fully and find that. I went through a lot of dark times, man. And you see guys, man, that commit suicide, after playing the game. You see, because they don't know who they are. Right. And it's important that we got just as many coaches that are coaching guys and trying to get them to the next level, whatever that next level might be. We need to have coaches and people in these players' lives that are letting them know that it's a lot bigger than this game as well. And it's important, I think it's important for guys to go, if you have the opportunity, to go to programs where there is a coach that is going to be there for a while, because he has a level of security that he's going to be able to provide a more holistic approach to things than maybe guys that they're coaching for their livelihoods. Right. And you might not get as much of the love and the parent, the mentorship. You might not get that. You might get guys that are just solely there to make sure that they can catch a check. But it's still about, another quote that I live by is pack your own parachute. When you jump out the plane and you pull that thing, it can't be that you were dependent on somebody else to pack your parachute for you. It's up to you to do that. And it's nobody else's responsibility but yours. So it's your responsibility to have a plan. It's great if somebody can help you with it, but it's not their responsibility. It's your responsibility to start tapping into your purpose. Yes, it's great if somebody can help you, but it's not their responsibility. It's your responsibility for these things, and guys need to know that.
Right. So, like you mentioned, you know, leaving the team, and then obviously some people advocating for you to try to get back on the team, and then, like I say, going through some depression, some shame as you're listening to the cheers of the fans from your apartment complex. So when did it sink in, and when did you actually know, and how did you process that when you were like, I'm not going to be playing football anymore?
Yeah, it probably took a year and some change of knowing that this is not happening. And then I transitioned into just another space of not knowing who I was, but I was throwing parties, because of the type of personality that I have and the friendships that I had. I still wanted to be a part. I still wanted to be in the in crowd and be popular and all those things. So I just transitioned to another form of that, but it still wasn't my purpose. In some ways, it was, because eventually my life ends up, in a place where I still am trying to gather people to a place. Just the place becomes the church instead of the club. But
Right.
It's still some of the same tools, right? It's some of the same marketing and some of the same having to get out and do promotion and convince people to be a part of something. But it ended up being throwing parties, man, at a club in downtown Baton Rouge, inviting some of my former teammates. And so that then became my identity, that I was the guy that could get you into a party on a Thursday night or on a whatever night, and could still have some level of influence that maybe provides you with the platform to be a connector in some ways. But it still was me missing my ultimate purpose.
Right. And you mentioned earlier about having, issues and just trying to pull yourself out of a dark place. Like, how did you do that? Were there people that helped you? Was it just something that you kind of did on your own? Could you speak to that?
Yeah, man. There's a lot that took place while I was in Baton Rouge. Some things that I won't mention. But there was a lot that took place, life and death situations that took place, things that will shake you to your core, things that will make you question everything, and those things took place. I had to truly hit a rock bottom. From being a former athlete where your physique is important and working out is important, to going through a depression and drinking and partying all the time and eating whatever, man. I had got up to almost 280 pounds. I was, sloppy. I was overweight. I was depressed. I was lost. And then life and death situations happened. And truly hitting rock bottom, sleeping on a friend's couch for months at a time. Just truly being destitute, man. And my biggest fear was having to come back to Shreveport. You want to return home as a conquering hero, not as a pierced, beat up, wounded soldier. Tattered, and that was my biggest fear. And in some ways, I prolonged my time in Baton Rouge because I was shamed to come back to Shreveport as someone that I didn't see myself as. I've always seen myself as success, as someone who was going to be great in some form or fashion. And it was a tough pill to swallow, man, having to come back to Shreveport, but it was necessary. I had to hit that rock bottom, man, in order to start moving forward. And that place of darkness, it was illuminating because I had great people in my life still at that time. I was fortunate enough that you were living in Baton Rouge at that time, man, and I got a chance to continue to spend time with you and get kind of back in church and start trying to do the things that I had kind of forsaken. And through that process, there was a level of enlightening and revelation that happened that was actually more than sports. And it was, it has taken on a different form that maybe we didn't see at that time, but it was this initial idea of of more than sports and being able to provide an opportunity for athletes to be able to get trained, but also they would get the full deal. And we're actually starting to see that actualize, man. You know, I've never been the type of person that I never was the type of person that needed the glory from things. I just wanted to see it happen. And so you see things now, like even with more than the athlete that like Brandon Marshall has, where these athletes are getting training and they're also getting the holistic approach to things. Man, these are things that we were discussing in 2009. Right? You know, you still have the emails of these things. Right. And the name More Than Sports is one that we had back in 2009. So whether it's more than an athlete or it's whatever all these other iterations that have come, you know, I love LeBron, but I can truly say, man, we were first. We were first in a lot of ways. We maybe didn't have that same platform, and maybe at the time the timing wasn't right. But that was the genesis of me kind of getting off the couch that I was in a daze in, and getting back to Shreveport and starting to move forward, man. And I needed something to be a part of, and I needed something that I could help build. Right. And that led to other things, right? That led to me being a part of a nonprofit organization. That led to me eventually being a part of a church staff and a ministry. But the genesis of that was, you know, what I get a chance to be a part of as a guest now, and that's the More Than Sports podcast.
Right. Okay. Well, no, it all comes full circle, like you said, man, and you know, just having other things that you can focus on. I think it's truly important if you're trying to pull yourself out of a tough situation. And you kind of mentioned earlier, like you put so much time, you put so much effort, you put so much sweat equity, so many years into athletics and the sports, and that is, you know, you don't know any better, but that has become your identity. And then when that's taken away, you've never thought, most players never even think of having a secondary plan, at least at that age. I mean, at 18, 19, you're not thinking of a secondary plan. You think you can do this forever. And then when all that's taken away, you're left trying to figure it out. And if you don't have, you know, a plan like you mentioned earlier, and at least have some people around you that can at least try to encourage you, like it's a very tough situation to kind of pull yourself out of that. But it's definitely encouraging to hear, man, you know, your process and your story as how that came around. But no, man, I know we've spent some time here, man, so I'm going to get you out of here. I do have a couple quick fire questions for you. So just listen up, man, and answer the best way you can.
All right.
Who is the best player that you've ever played with?
Whew. That's a great question. I will say that the best player I ever played with is, rest in peace, Joe McKnight. After Hurricane Katrina, Joe came to Shreveport from John Curtis, and I was fortunate enough to be able to play with him for several games before John Curtis came and made sure he got back to New Orleans. But the most gifted naturally that I have been around, just fluid, effortless, just so gifted, man. And obviously, eventually he goes on to USC. He's All-American, 5-star, blue chip, right. USC, NFL, New York Jets. And unfortunately, man, his life was cut short. That still is something of a sadness there, man, because he was truly a great guy. And but I have the privilege of saying that he stiff-armed me in a practice, and I haven't been stiff-armed too many times, and that goes from high school and even LSU practices, man. I went up against some really great linebackers, running backs, but he's on the very short list of guys that pulled off a stiff arm on me, but I'm proud that it was someone like him.
Right. Yeah, I guess when he came into USC, he was kind of supposed to be like that next, Reggie Bush.
He was Reggie Bush. He was supposed to be Reggie Bush.
Right.
Absolutely. And that's tough shoes to fill, man. Reggie Bush is at USC as a one-of-one.
Yes.
I think Joe did the best that he could, but them holding him up to the Reggie Bush standard, man, that was going to be tough for anybody to come in and follow.
Yeah, and that was a totally different team also. I mean, that
Yep.
team Reggie was on was stacked from the beginning, so
Right.
that always helps. All right, which player that you played against, you said, gave you the toughest challenge?
Oh man, I played against some great ones. I played against Trent Williams.
Okay.
My junior year at Evangel. Everybody knows who. If you're a football fan, you know who Trent
Silverback.
Williams is.
Yeah,
One of the honestly, he's going to go down as probably one of the greatest offensive tackles of his time, and by far the most challenging that I've ever played against. You want to talk about a heck of an athlete, a force, a massive man, even at 17 years old. And you see the work that he's putting in now. I've been fortunate enough to actually play some pickup basketball with Trent Williams. It was actually during the lockout year the NFL had, years ago now, through a former teammate of mine, Perry Riley, and I actually saw him dunk the basketball. And we're talking about a 300-pound man get up in there and dunk the ball. That just lets you know what kind of athlete he was and is, and definitely the most challenging that I have been up against.
Right. Okay. Who is your favorite sports analyst or journalist, and why?
Yeah, man, I watch a lot of those guys. Obviously, we know the big names, the Stephen A. Smiths, the Shannon Sharps. I talked about Stuart Scott before. I think he's a pioneer for a lot of those guys. But my favorite would probably be Bomani Jones. I think he's a really intelligent guy. I think he approaches sports from a very intellectual place. And also he's extremely knowledgeable, and he's a funny guy as well.
Yeah.
And I think he provides a level of truth and perspective, especially when it comes to social issues. But he provides, I think, a voice that is extremely needed. And so I'm normally tuning in if he's on, highly questionable, or his podcast. I'm normally checking it out, man. I think he is one of the best doing it right now.
Okay, good deal. Favorite movie of all time?
Godfather 1 and 2.
Godfather. You can't go wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
All right, and if you could eat one thing, for the rest of your life, what would it be?
It'd be my dad's tacos. Easy question. If you've ever been able to have them before, you understand what I'm talking about. But that would be my favorite meal. That would be, I could eat it every day. It would be my last meal. If I ever had to get to that point, it would be the tacos from Lydell Smith, Saginaw's finest.
Good deal. But no, we definitely appreciate your time, man. Appreciate your story. Appreciate your insight. I know hopefully we'll get this out, man, and help a lot of other people coming up, man, so they can hear your perspective on how, to kind of change the game in reference to how you're looking at yourself, which I think a lot more people are looking at that as it relates to when they're coming out of high school into college, and to understand like the brevity of the situation and taking it a lot more serious. But I think every story has a different twist, a different perspective, and that people can glean off of it and kind of continue to learn from it. So I appreciate you taking the time to share your story today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the More Than Sports Podcast. Please like, subscribe, and set your notifications so you can be up to date on new content. Also, if you have a story you'd like to share, please reach out to us at mystory@morethansportspodcast.com.